Now, why I'm saying all this? Because you can understand when it comes to this that our references are different. There is someone, Blacher, who is Orientalist. He was dealing on the issue of secular and religious state. And he said, if you come to Islam and you need to define what is an Islamic state and how the Muslims are dealing with the Islamic state, he came with something very specific, very interesting. In logic terms, it's nonsense. But it just shows how much he was confused with Muslims, with the way we deal with authority. And he said, in fact, if you look at the way the Muslims are dealing with religion and they are dealing with authority, in fact, a state that is based on Islamic principles is a secular theocratic state. Sorry? Secular is opposed to theocracy. Now, to define Islam, you put the two together. So it's as if when you look at something, you say, it's a white-black reality. I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense. Why? Because he was confused. Because the Muslims, in their reference, they are not following the theocratic model, and they are not following the complete secular. In fact, there is something which is essential in our way of dealing with the state and with power, is we are distinguishing authority with one condition, as I said yesterday. In between the two, there is a consistency. When you deal with public affairs, when we deal with worldly affairs, when you deal with the bottom up, there are still principles that you have to follow, is the ethical reference. The ethical reference means we are not divorcing politics from principles that should be dealt with. For example, who is going to be elected? How do we deal with the principles of power are very important. So our way of dealing with power and religious power is based on the text. But the way we deal with public power is based on principles, ethical principles that we have to follow. For example, the integrity. Why, for example, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was chosen? He was chosen because he was perceived as the one who was the most skilled as leading the country, leading the community. And it means that he was the most skilled, not only as a politician, but with morality. So we are not divorcing power from morality. And this is something which is important in our discussion with the civil state. Now, tell me which type of civil state you are talking about. A civil state where there is no ethics, or a civil state where we are having an Islamic reference, or a religious reference, or philosophical reference based on ethics. So, you understand now that if you come from the West and the way the civil state was understood, and you come in Islam and you understand that we have this distinction in authority, we come back to what was done by the Muslims in history. And once again, we come back to the model of the first government and the first governance that was set for the Muslims in Medina. And the only thing that you can take from Medina are the principles of governance. But you cannot duplicate the Medinian model today. The Medinian model is not going to work today. If you want to implement the Medinian model of the 7th century today, you cannot even run Penang. You can't. It's too complex. The reality of that time in economy, it was closed market, closed economy. It was at the level of Medina. It's not now the global world where in Penang you are completely under the influence of all the economic powers in the world and your situation in the country. The world of politics and the world of power has changed. You can't duplicate historical model, but you can extract historical principles. This is what we have to do as Muslims today to understand what do we mean by the civil state. So you understand I'm coming from very far to come to practical answers for today. But this we have to be equipped. We cannot just come with simplistic answers just to please ourselves or to please people. It has to be rooted in our tradition. And rooted in our tradition means that we don't have models. Anyone who is telling you from an Islamic perspective, we have model and we follow. Very often I'm asked, what is the best model for Muslims today? I'm sorry, there is none. I'm not following the petromonarchies. I'm not following any, and even you, when it is said that you are the best democracy, I'm sorry to tell you, wake up. Wake up. There is no best democracy. You have a lot to do to improve your democracy, and the first is to act against corruption and to act for more transparency. It's not very transparent. It's not many levels. So you have to improve, but based also on your ethics, based on the fact that you have, you know, a Muslim population, you have Buddhists, you have Christians, you have people in this society who have ethics. And we all agree that we need more justice, we need more dignity, we need more transparency. At least I hope we agree on this. And whatever is your background as Muslims, you have to come into the discussion about the state and not only come with confusing religion and state, understanding that they are distinguishing authorities, but when it comes to the state authority, we need ethical principles to be implemented. This is what we want. And we'll come to this now in the second and coming to my conclusion. So, when I speak about now the reality of today, we don't have a model, but we have principles. What could be the principles that are helping us to deal with the state, and how are we going to qualify the state? So, the ethical principles and the objectives. When we speak about civil state, we are speaking about three things. The power of the state is decided by the people. So there is a bottom-up, as I said. There is another dimension which is important in the civil state, it's what we call the civil society. And the civil society is what is between the individuals and between the structured state, okay? The civil society is in between. Everything that the people coming from one, the individual, to a society is organizing as resisting the power of the state or being a medium power. In the middle, between the state and between the individual, there are institutions, there is a life where the civil state is expressing itself. Meaning that the power of the state should find within the society a counterpower. And the counterpower is coming from the citizens and institutions that should remain independent and should be able to speak out. In fact, the state should give a space for the citizens to be critical and to ask the state for accountability. So any state that is cutting the civil society from requesting accountability is leading towards a dictatorship. A dictatorship is taking over the state power and not letting the citizens play what they should play within a democratic civil state, is criticizing the state or asking for accountability. And if you look at a shura, it's exactly this. A shura should be a space where you come back and you are able to criticize, to ask for accountability, and to be able to resist to a potential absolute power of the state. So when the Prophet ﷺ was coming back to his people and his companions, in fact, he was letting them checking his own power by saying, this is right, this is wrong, which kind of strategy. So we need a civil society. Anything which has to do with the civil society, it's important, is in between the individual and the state organization. So we need to think about that. Now, what is the role of religious institutions? And if you look at the Islamic tradition, it's quite clear that many of the great scholars refuse to play the role of the state power. Remember Abu Ibn Hanbal, and even all the, by the way, now we are celebrating many scholars, but we don't remember that many of these scholars were put in jail by power, they were resisting power, they were independent from power, they didn't want to play, they didn't want to be used by power in order to justify what was the Islamic ground. They wanted to be independent. And we need to have in our societies religious leaders, muftis, and people who are quite independent, not decided and not chosen and not co-opted and not having their say imposed by the state. This is why we need this discussion. A scholar within the state should be the voice of accountability and ethical ground.